What is up, YouTube? My name is Paige and welcome back, or welcome to my booktube channel. And today the video that I am bringing to you is my reads from May. I'm doing it outside. There's noise happening. I'm not sure if this was a terrible idea, but we're rolling with it because it is a beautiful, beautiful end of May. It's the last day of May, and I am going to be honest about what I read and how I liked it or I didn't. For those of you who are joining for the first time, I am getting back into reading. I did a literature degree in French, and I do most of my reading in English. I'm probably going to read some French books over the summer, but I'm trying to get back into reading, trying to read like at least 4 books a month. The way I chose the books for the month of May was I used a random draw system. This TBR jar, and it's not just a jar. It is 4 drawers and a bowl. And I'm going to be going through those. I didn't get to one of them. I read about, I don't know, a couple chapters of it, and we'll go through it. We'll just go through the whole thing. So usually I make like meticulous notes and really focus on my ratings and talk really deeply about each of the books that I'm reviewing. This month I'm trying something a little bit different, just kind of free flow through these reviews, and we'll see how that goes. And if you have any input on whether you like that or you didn't, comparing it to my other videos, please drop a comment below. I appreciate any feedback. Huge fan of constructive criticism. Not a lie. Actually am. So I actually didn't get 2 books technically this month, but one of them I wasn't really expecting to read all in the month. So as we go through, you'll see what I mean. There's 2 books in this pile that actually weren't part of my random draw, my random TBR jar situation, but I have created with my cousin, whose Instagram I'll link below, and my mom, we've created for ourselves a little mini book club, and it's going so well, and honestly, it's super fun. They live real far away from me, so we get to do little video calls and we talk about the books and we go through like each chapter, even each page, and talk about what we highlighted and what we underlined. We're real nerdy about it. It's super fun. So the first book that my cousin and I read for this brand new makeshift book club was The Search Party by Hannah Richell. This is about 3 families. One family who has moved away from London and decides that they're better off owning some kind of wilderness resort because their son, whom they've adopted recently, has been struggling in school and struggling otherwise. So they pick up, they move to this wilderness resort, and they invite their 2 other best friend families to join them, and they have children themselves. They're all kind of around the same age or ish. So the kids are expected to just play with each other and just like have fun over this weekend, and they don't have fun at all. So much happens. It's a mystery. I'm not going to tell you exactly what kind of thriller mystery it is, like what kind of crime happens in this book, but there's so many different personalities in this book, and they're all captured with such either grace or grit, depending on the personality. Hannah Richell just like does such a good job of creating a scene based on the characters. So it's such an interesting snapshot of every character in this book. She's a red herring fan. She's got a lot in there, and it's really hard to tell which are red herrings and which are actual like clues. On the back it says it's a compelling thriller. Super compelling. Like, we gobbled this book up. It was so hard to stop reading at our like predetermined checkpoints because this book was so sick. There were a few twists. There's a lot of foreshadowing and some just really good writing. Not new to the genre. This isn't her first book, but it is satisfying. It is just twisty enough. It's not super long. It's just 338 pages long. Amazing book club read if you're looking for one. And it has a very cool Canadian cover. If you're looking for a good thriller to start off your summer reading list, I would recommend this one. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't a perfect 5 for me because there were some not holes, like she ties everything up, but there were some choices I think that were a little too frustrating for me, and I guess that's human, right? It didn't get a 5 for me, but it got a really solid 4, leaning towards the 4.5, but I gave this one a 4. Now the second book I started this month was The second book I started this month was Charles Dickens' Bleak House, and it's hefty, like it's a thick one. So I wasn't expecting to get through it, and I haven't. I've gotten to page 216, Chapter 16, if you've read this book, you might know that I'm getting into the most interesting part of this book. Honestly, like, I've really enjoyed some of the characters. I'm listening to it as an audiobook as well, just like in tandem with reading it. I prefer to read it, but the audiobook that I'm listening to is really well done as well. It's voiced by two different audiobook narrators. One's a man and one's a woman, and it fits the story perfectly. I'm gonna get through this slowly but surely, but it'll take me a while. If I had to rate this section of the book, which is silly, I'd probably give it like a 3.5. It's kind of boring at the beginning, and it drags for a while, and he focuses a little too much on certain characters that I haven't seen the payoff for yet, and there may be payoff later on. I think I've caught the perfect sections of this book as an audiobook, so I've just been able to breeze through the kind of like the transitional portions of this book. So I'm gonna continue reading this and I'll give a full review. Okay, next up I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know it's so popular on Book Talk, BookTube, and Bookstagram, or it was popular, especially right when it was first published. And I don't know if I'm just like not so chronically online, because I've heard that it's so overhyped, but this book was like not hyped enough for me. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This is a book that I'll recommend to anybody who's like in a reading slump or is looking for an easy read that they'll really thoroughly enjoy. But I also bawled my eyes out at the end. Like, there was something for everybody that lives within me in this book. It is the story of, and I'm just realizing now that I didn't tell you what Bleak House is about, but you don't need to know. It's a Charles Dickens book about an orphan. Monique Grant is a journalist for a magazine, and she interviews Evelyn Hugo, who has notoriously been married 7 times. She is the most famous actress, or at least was, in the, like, I was gonna say the late 1900s, which is like, doesn't make any sense. It does, but that's not something I would say. Youths! She's like the most famous actress in the 50s to the 80s, but she never gives interviews. She doesn't go on covers of magazines. She doesn't do photo shoots. She's reclusive. Monique Grant is offered this interview, this whole spread by Evelyn Hugo, and ends up writing her memoir. I won't tell you exactly how that happens. Through the twists and turns of Evelyn Hugo's very tumultuous marriages, Monique discovers what Evelyn Hugo's definition of love is and whom she loved the most in her life. There's also a connection between the two, which you find out very early on in the book, and you don't know what the connection is, and that's really the kind of the twist at the end, and that's what you're working towards. There's a lot of interesting, like, kind of backhanded, almost like misplaced feminism on Evelyn Hugo's part, but that's entirely the point. So it's kind of interesting to see somebody who's in their 80s talking about what female empowerment means to them, especially in the globe of Hollywood. So it just like had some interesting insights, and I wonder how true this is if you were to speak to a very famous actress or actor, what they would say. This is something that everyone should know about stars. We like to be told we are adored, and we want you to repeat yourself. Later in my life, people would always come up to me and say, I'm sure you don't want to hear me blabbering on about how great you are. And I always say, as if I'm joking, oh, one more time won't hurt. But the truth is, praise is just like an addiction. The more you get it, the more of it you need to stay even. I don't know, there's just like pieces of this book that I'm like, this is hyped enough. This is a good book. I'm not going to read any more of it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Found the middle a little bit too long, but I still wanted to read every next chapter. Like, I had a hard time stopping every time I had to, stop reading for the night or after the gym or whatever it might have been. So I entirely read this book, didn't listen to it at all, and I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, but like, it would be another 4.5. I was very lucky this month. These books were fantastic. I loved this month. This month was great. Next, this is the first book in a duology. This was the second book that my cousin and my mom, because my mom joined our book club, this is the book that we read. It was my cousin's choice. Search Party was my choice. So I found Search Party on one of my favorite podcasts. I listen to it almost every day. It's called Writer's Routine. I mentioned it in my last video, but I'm going to mention it again because that is where I found Search Party, and I love it, and you might too. Lisa Jewell's The Family Upstairs, first in a duology, and we again like ate this book up. It's a thriller. It was an easy read. It's just like twists and turns, and I have to say, and also about Search Party and Evelyn Hugo, actually, be aware that these books all contain some trigger warnings. There's SADA, people who unalive themselves, people who unalive others. So just be wary of any thrillers. If someone says thriller, you know, if you're looking to get into something and you love British murder mysteries, this is the one. This is fantastic. And there's a second one, and so we're going to read that as well soon. This is a story of a family, kind of. So this is the story of, I don't want to give too much away. It's so hard to say. This is the story of a young woman who's 25 who is adopted as a baby and finds out on her 25th birthday that she is inheriting a house, a very fancy house, a very expensive house that will make her rich when she sells it. We quickly find out that there has been some kind of mysterious death in this house. There are 3 people who were found to have poisoned themselves and were presumed to be a cult. We follow the stories of some of the children that lived in this house and the mysterious life that they lived when one family moves in with another and their whole lives get turned upside down. Lisa Jewell is a fan of the unreliable narrator, and it is used in this book, so if you're not a fan of that, maybe avoid, but it was interesting, well played throughout this entire novel. I'm very excited to read the next one. And I didn't have a whole lot of notes on like critiques in this book. Like, it wasn't all tied up so neatly. A lot of that can be excused because of the unreliable narrator. I do like a tight thriller. This one wasn't as tight as a lot of the other ones I've read, where everything's got a neat little bow on it at the end, or you're not left with questions that are unanswerable because there's plot holes, but you're left with questions that are unanswerable because the author has left those kind of like loose ends on purpose. This seemed to have a couple plot holes, but because it's a duology, I'm expecting those to be filled in the next book. There was no part of this book that was slow. She chooses her words very carefully. There is a lot of foreshadowing. There's a lot of very interesting and like intelligent writing. It's not literary fiction, but it is written as like it could be literary fiction. It's so easy to read that you're like, it couldn't be. You could analyze this for a class. She uses so much imagery, so many metaphors, and it's beautiful. I don't have a lot to read, like anything that I would read would like give away and something in the book, and I don't want to give away any mysteries. All the characters in here were just like kind of perfect, lovable or completely unlikable or disgusting. Perfect characters in this book. She's funny. I laughed out loud. It's sad, it's like gut-wrenching, and of course there's all of those triggers in here. But I gave this book 4 stars. A 5 is hard for me. I gave this book 4 stars. It could easily be a 5 for you. It was a 5 for my cousin, probably a 5 for my mom, but yeah, I don't give a lot of books 5 stars. Maybe I'm just cheap. I have 2 more books to get to, and one of them I haven't really read very much at all in. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Young Jane Young, which I read on my Kindle, and I just finished it earlier today, and I read it in I read the majority of this book at the gym. I read when I'm doing cardio, and I get my Kindle real sweaty. The format of this book was unlike anything I've ever read. So to give you an idea, Young Jane Young is like a political character piece on a few different women, and it is about, maybe that's not how Gabrielle Zevin would explain it, but that's how I think about it. It's about a congressman who has an affair with an intern, and how that like rattles the life of a few women. The intern herself, whose name is Aviva Grossman, her mother's life, the congressman's wife, and Aviva's daughter. It's very interesting. I'd never really heard about it. It did a good job of like not explaining on the back of the book what's going to happen, and I tried to do the same just now. This book is split into 5 parts. The first part is in first person, and it's from Aviva's mother's perspective. The second part is from Aviva's perspective in first person many years after the affair. The third part is a string of emails. I'll leave it at that. The fourth part is from the congressman's wife's perspective, but it's in third person. The fifth part, and I think I have a soft spot for this, was my favorite part. It was in second person, so it uses the you, and it was maybe the most emotional part of the book, but it wasn't like cry your eyes out emotional, for me at least. Like, it was the perfect kind of round out to the end of this novel. And it's written very well. I underlined a lot. It is about the kind of like modern Jewish experience in the United States, especially in the southern United States, sections of Miami and other parts of Florida where there's a very dense Jewish population. So that was interesting. That's not something that I'm very familiar with. So that was, I thought, very interesting to read about. And I really appreciated this book. I've been hesitant to read any Gabrielle Zevin because tomorrow, I'd heard, I actually have it downloaded on here and I didn't read it because I'd heard that it was just such a like inaccurate representation of what it's like to build a video game. And this may very well be a very inaccurate representation of what it's like to run a congressional campaign, but I don't know that. And so I enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. And I think you should read it too if you're looking for something that's like just gonna draw you through all the way. This would be another reading slump breaker. Young Jane Young, 4 stars. Okay, and finally, I am a couple chapters into this book. This is the last one on my list for this month, and I haven't gotten through it, but I'm going to be honest, I did read some of it already, is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. And what I've read so far, I'm so excited to read this book. I'm going to read you real quick the first little bit of the synopsis, and if I were to give the section that I've read so far a rating, it would be 5 stars, easy. Like, this book is, I think this book is going to be a favorite, and I really hope it is. In 1972, the workers in Pottstown, Pennsylvania were digging the foundation for a new housing development. The last thing they were expecting to uncover was a human skeleton. Who the skeleton was and how it got buried there were just 2 of the long-held secrets that had been kept for decades by the residents of Chicken Hill, the dilapidated neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans lived side by side, sharing ambitions and sorrows. I am so excited to read this. This is gonna, I think I'm gonna cry. I've cried a lot more reading these books than I anticipated. Anyway, these were my reads for the month, and it was a fabulous month of reading. I was very happy I did it.